Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is another unscripted session of Oasis Digital's Angular Bootcamp curriculum development. And today we've got Paul Spears,
Jack Valvis,
Chris Harden.
Lance Finney.
Kyle Cordes.
And so today I think we're going to take a look at working on refining a feature that we've had in our curriculum for some time, but we wanted to take a spin at just polishing it a bit more. And so I think the topic today is going to be change detection strategy, and in particular we want to talk about OnPush. And so again, this has been in our curriculum for a while, but the way we've approached it is that we have very technical descriptions of everything, including our component names. So we're describing the technology and the feature, but we don't really have it placed inside a conceptual use case, basically.
Trying to make it more real.
Yeah, we're trying to make this something that motivates the why behind it. So with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the keyboard over to someone here, as I have other things I'm going to get engaged with. So guys, take it away.
Maybe you can come back and be a tiebreaker if we
there we
reach
go.
an impasse over how it should be done.
Bye, Paul.
So you want to get this up and running?
Yeah.
And this should be all set up. Yeah, so just the start should be sufficient.
I just had a brief moment where I was like, is it learn or ABC? Because I'm like that
Right.
old.
Oh no! Wow. We have had the question come up of like, how often and what do we do for AngularJS instruction? And we do occasionally. Whoa! Why are there so many bookmarks visible? I guess they're all benign. We do still occasionally do an AngularJS.
I'm going to be teaching a class.
We have one in a couple months.
Yeah.
I've got a class in a couple weeks where they're coming from. They're not learning the JS, but they're coming from JS.
Okay.
So let's see. So this is step 7.
7 something.
Something.
708.
There it is.
Yeah, I was excited when I saw where that upcoming class was, and I was going to ask for it, and then I saw it was a JS class, and then I decided to be quiet.
You were less excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so like
Interesting.
Paul was saying, it's actually like pretty technical in its design. You pick what kind of data source and what change it, right? Yeah, you said you taught this recently.
I teach this.
Take us through this. Yeah.
So
Although before we do that, can you put the OBS on the second screen so we can see what's going on, what we look like?
Oh yeah, just click. Yeah, just that way we see the. Yeah.
All right.
Nice. So what this step is doing is it's demonstrating the different combinations of how you can both pass around changes. Is this something you need? Okay. Pass around changes and have your change detection strategy, right? So for the data source here, we have 3 options. We have the mutated array, we have an array that gets replaced with a new copy, and then we have an observable for an array that is then subscribed to using the async pipe.
And the third is what we mostly do in real apps.
So
right?
this is the one that we usually do in our applications.
Okay.
And but all 3 of them work with the default change detection strategy.
Okay.
Right? So this is basically it's pushing new items into the array. We can do things like we can toggle the Boolean value in the first item, or like toggle all of them. We can handle like adding another item manually.
Okay.
So I think the interval that does this only actually does it 100 times before it stops. So
what's the purpose of the interval? Like how is the interval?
It's so that as you're going through and like changing these different drop downs, you can see changes still happening over time.
It's so that there's like a source of change, so you're not having to also create the change.
Right. So we have a way to manually create a change, and we have automatic changes that are happening over time.
Okay.
So this is basically you can choose the way in which you're going to be passing data down into your child components.
Okay.
And then over here, you can change the change detection strategy of those components. So if we change to OnPush, we should see that even though change is still happening, right, that observable is still emitting, our value that's being displayed is not changing.
Gross.
And if we change to a replaced array, we can see that now that change is being propagated properly because the actual array itself is being replaced and triggering OnPush change detection.
This is actually pretty good.
Right, but if we do this, then I think we still have, if we still do like a toggle first item, right, notice how the true false value didn't change.
Ooh.
Right, because that button is implemented to just change the value in place inside the array.
Okay.
Right? It doesn't actually replace the whole array.
Okay.
And so you don't actually see that change happening.
Okay.
So, but then if we change to an observable, right, it works, or at least it should work all the way through. Maybe this button only works. We'll have to look at this button.
Yeah.
That's what I thought was good.
There's some oddity of what that button actually does. Okay.
As it exists right now, the lesson I get from this is never use OnPush.
Right. So that's why we're having this discussion.
Take your data.
So the reason that we want to have this discussion, right, is because we're showing, what works and what doesn't. And as you were saying, it looks like OnPush works in fewer circumstances.
Which is true.
Which is technically true. What we don't demonstrate here is the benefit of using OnPush.
And that's what Paul was getting at right before we started recording.
Right.
We should this is not just only about how does it work. We should try to somehow make this more clearly demonstrate why you should care about OnPush.
Right. So kind of in our work, we by default use this observable async model, and so we don't fundamentally really care about this. We've kind of, in a sense, already decided.
Yeah.
But in our classes, we're trying to impress upon our students, this is one of the reasons why you should go to the trouble of learning observables really well, is because then it plays nice with things like OnPush.
Well, a lot of our students, we call the thing boot camp.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are teams that are already using it, that are trying to level up.
Right.
Yeah.
This example doesn't make sense to me. The replaced array and then why the toggle first item. Or you said the toggle first item doesn't work on any of them. Is that?
It works on the mutated one. I don't think it works on this one though. Oh no.
Well, they're not being refreshed anymore. I think they're.
Yeah.
You might have to refresh the screen.
Oh yeah, because
that's. I wonder if we should make that thing keep going forever, because it's really weird that it runs for a while then stops.
Right, because here we can toggle the first item no problem, and then here
we're on default change detection strategy now. Everything works here.
Right, so everything is going to work.
Yeah, I feel like we need to start looking at the code now to understand what does this button do and what was the purpose of being able to click it. I also wonder how this is really implemented behind the scenes here.
Yeah, because it doesn't make any sense to me.
So when I talk about OnPush change detection in the class, usually it's in context of an earlier step. I don't show this one. I've never actually looked at this one before. But the step where we're using subjects and services in order to, as the basis, as the backing for employees and positions. And the way that is actually implemented, it doesn't work with OnPush. And so I'll go through and I'll change some of the components to OnPush, and then I'll start interacting with it, and some of the components are fine and some aren't. And then I explain that it's actually an immutability issue with the way that subject is defined. And so instead of pushing into an array, you have to create a new array and that sort of thing. And so that works within that context, but it doesn't give the motivation of why you would want to do OnPush. It is showing, I'm really using that as a way of talking about immutability more than I am talking about change detection itself.
Right, and all these things kind of play into each other, right?
Yeah.
It's all a big circle.
But if we want an example that is more a real world example. Well, we do have one where if you switch it to OnPush, it breaks. We have that already. It doesn't show as many things as this does, so I'm not sure.
I mean, showing that OnPush breaks certain things, that's the wrong direction.
Right.
We need to show why you should want OnPush. Now, I actually do have one reason. It's because some of the Angular team people have said, in a future version of Angular, if things continue to go well and how they're implementing IV, etc., you'll be able to tree shake out all the change detection support. You'll be able to do change detection less Angular. And if you follow the rule that you don't need any change detection, you'll not only throw away all the change detection code, you'll actually throw away the dependency on zones. Because zone is needed to trigger change detection. And so I think zoneless Angular is the phrase that was going around at the last NGConf.
So this will not only be potentially a concern for performance in terms of runtime speed, but also in terms of overall size. Yeah.
And it's possible in Angular I don't know, 12 or something, just making up a number. I mean, keep in mind, if you get a counter out, that's not that long from now. It's possible that, like, basically change detection will be like opt-in training wheels.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, like, the default will be to push, on push, don't mutate data.
Yeah. I could see existing applications will stick with change detection, and new projects
Right.
would not
Yeah.
use it at all because you would just do it right in front. Because
That'd be great.
taking any of the projects I'm on right now and saying, all right, we're going to switch everything to OnPush, I think everything would grind to a halt because just things aren't designed that way. But if you're starting with that approach,
I mean, we've
then
had
you do it right.
we've had customer projects where critical features got broken because someone trying to solve some problem in front of them just like started randomly putting on push in various components through their app, and then it appeared to work in their kind of first level testing, and so they merged it into master and so on, and then problems broke down here, and we've had to go through and like help them track down what really could be on push and what couldn't be.
I think I've made that mistake in the past.
Okay, so we have some kind of explanatory text here, but at least from what I can see on the screen, it's really only about what the settings mean. Can you just take a quick scroll and see, is there anything in here other than just what they mean? Oh, check that out. We have a stray $sign is snuck into our... yeah, there you go. Look at that. We've made an improvement already. Ooh, navigating the example app. There's actually instructions here about navigating the example app. Wow.
Can I say that in your drop down you have 3 things, but those 3 things are not all apples.
It's our drop down.
Our drop down. Sorry.
So you're saying these 3 things
Yes,
are fundamentally different?
Right. So 2 of them are about, on push change detection literally means detect when inputs actually changed object references. That's what the first 2 items are about. The third one is just that the async pipe calls mark for check for you. That's completely unrelated. Well, you can call mark for, that's all about, a backend call or something outside of an input pass requires you to tell Angular that, by the way, something other than my inputs change and I want Angular to do something, I'm going to call change detect ref.mark for check.
I mean, that's
async
what's happening.
Pipe does that for you.
I mean, that's what's happening behind the scenes, but...
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with the definition of, on push means my inputs have changed object references. That has nothing to do with observables in the async pipe.
So you're saying that this is extraneous. It's
yeah, I mean, it's an important point, but it is not, it's like apple, orange.
Well, actually, I think the second 2 are basically equivalent. If you replace the array, you'll cause that component to be marked and on push to trigger, and if you use observable sync, it will mark that component.
But the 2 are about inputs. Whether you mutate, if you're passing an array to an input, whether you mutate that array or you set a new array so that the input has changed. The observable in the async is not about modifying inputs. Now you might have the async pipe on an input, so it's passing through.
I think that's what that means. Maybe let's go figure out where that data source goes in the code, because I think what that actually means is where it says data source. I think what they mean is what kind of thing are you putting in the input binding of a component.
Okay. I still feel like that's
we need to label it better.
I still feel like that is extraneous, as you said, because really the end result is a new object reference is going into whether you use the async pipe or not. The fact is that in the outer component, mark for check was called.
Okay, so it's the thing named data. So let's go see what happens to the thing named data. Oh, look at that. Yeah, check that out. We're actually taking that data and strategy, putting a dash between them, and using an ng switch to figure out what component to put underneath.
Yeah. And so, where's the async pipe at?
Well, look.
Yeah, see, this is my point. The fact that the async pipe has anything to do with anything is that the async pipe is calling mark for check on this outer component.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with how inputs work.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's calling it on the outer component, which causes change detection to fire into the inner component.
Exactly. And the fact that, your input change on your lower component would actually be irrelevant if you didn't have the async pipe calling mark for check on the outer component, because anytime the outer component does a backend call, mark for check has to be called explicitly, and the async pipe makes that explicit call for you and has nothing to do with inputs.
So I think the reason why this landed this way is that, from the kind of the mental model of using it, the very like if we didn't have the third one, the observable variant, then like everybody's hand in the room who we just spent the last 3 hours extolling the virtues of observables and async pipe, they would all have their hands up. What if I used an async pipe in that input? So I think that's literally why it's there.
So-
It's because like at the point we are here, we probably just talked about async pipe for the last 3 hours.
I feel like it's very confusing though, because normally when I'm thinking about async pipe and change detection, I'm thinking about it in terms of inside of a component. Now let's not assume everybody does smart and dumb components. Let's say we have a component,
Yeah.
it's making a backend call and it's on its own view, it wants to display data. I have to use the async pipe rather than subscribing to avoid having to call mark for check myself. And again, that has nothing to do with inputs.
So the frustration is that these like lines 46, 53, and 60 are outside of the component where we're twiddling with the OnPush setting, right?
I think
No,
you have to do that either.
my point is that 53 and 46 are how do we pass data to an input?
Yeah.
Do we change the object reference or not?
Right.
I think you
60 muddies the water because it really has nothing to do with it. 60 and the one where we pass in a new array are equivalently the same as far as the child component. is
Yeah,
concerned.
right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. So that's what I'm getting. Like,
Okay.
are you saying that we should be doing these differences inside that child component?
I'm saying that the whole async or not async pipe is a separate discussion.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just a different way of achieving. Look, line 60 is just a different way. It's a convenient way of achieving the same thing as line 53.
Not necessarily, because you're adding another layer of where did my array come from? Did my array come from the back end? Did it, how did I get that array? If on line 53, if this guy is on push as well, which I
This
Well,
guy
it's
is not.
not.
The outer component is not.
So
we're
these three are
twiddling
all
with the inner
default.
component.
okay, then the async
And
pipe
then
has nothing
these
to do
three
with
are all
anything.
on push. There's one of each.
Then the async pipe is irrelevant. You could have subscribed and then you would have the same result.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Okay,
Yes.
but the problem is
But-
here the async pipe is irrelevant, but we're making it one of the options to try to show relevance. But it actually is relevant, but used in a different way and for a different
But
reason.
aren't all these more relevant if they're inside the component where we're doing the on
Well,
push?
but that's what I'm
Oh,
saying. There's
so.
two different points, right? There's your inputs have to be immutable object references.
Okay.
And by the way, if you make backend calls or do something other than passing through inputs, you have to let Angular know that something happened. If it's not a click event
Yeah.
or an input
I have to
change,
tap next to it.
you have to notify Angular, hey, mark for check. By the way, the async pipe does that for
Like
you.
what-
It has nothing to do with the inputs.
I think that particular point is actually separate from what we're talking about here. So
But-
I think you've
Right.
actually convinced me that this third example is not needed.
I want to get. Pause that for a minute.
Okay.
Do you let code that calls mark for check through code review? Because I usually don't. I usually
It
say,
depends. Why not?
say, why are you reaching deep into the toolbox here?
If
There's
the
probably
async-
some high level thing you could do instead.
Okay, the high level thing would be the async pipe.
Yeah.
But if there was, for some reason, if you can't. Now, the async pipe is only convenient if you want to actually display something directly on a view in a neat way like that. And the async pipe is just calling mark for check. It's not that big of a deal. If
Yeah.
they can do it, why can't I do it? It's set up to let you to do that. It's a simple injection in the constructor. And
Yeah.
so I come from the perspective of before I started working on customer projects, when I had my own projects and I
Yeah.
made the rules.
Yeah.
Every component except for add component was on push by default all the time.
Yeah.
No
Mhm.
exceptions. And so you would run into cases where, and we weren't that good at using the async pipe, honestly. But
Yeah.
and we got better at that.
Yeah.
But, I do something I call mark for check so that it updates. I mean, yes, you try to limit them by having async pipes, but it's not
Yeah.
like the most heinous thing in the world to have a mark for check in there. And I think it's
Hmm.
important to understand that that's what the async pipe is doing, and that's really what's special about it.
Yeah.
When you ask, do I let those things, well, you asked her whether she
Yeah.
lets those things through. I haven't written or even really seen mark for
Yeah.
check in years. But when we worked for a different company years ago,
Yeah.
we had a lot of them.
Because
And-
we didn't know better.
Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
know
We
what
didn't
we
know
were
to
doing
write the
yet.
async pipe. But
See,
there are a few
I
situations.
should think that the mark for check should be one of those things. It's like, oh, there's certain things that have names. Oh, like, I think we saw this in a React context a couple weeks ago. Like, dangerously set inner HTML. Like, I think it's one of those things that should be a name, right? You should have to apologize for using it as you type the name for it. Mark for check because I can't think of a better way to do this. open close paren. It might be too strong.
I don't know about that. I mean, all it's saying is that I did something. I've turned off change detection, which you say is the way we want to go.
Yeah.
And I've done something outside of the normal DOM event cycle.
Yeah.
So I've
But,
got
like,
to tell
what-
Angular about
What would
it.
that happen? Like what would happen?
If you want to, if your view isn't set up nicely so that you end up with one little item to send through an async pipe. I mean, I suppose you can always do contortions somehow to get an async pipe in there. But
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes I'm like, is it worth it? I could go through a lot of contortions to make this all async pipeable.
I mean, but if the source of your novelty
Mm-hmm.
is not observable, probably shouldn't it be? Like if it's some backend system, shouldn't it be coming back as an observable?
Yeah.
Like when should the novelty not be arriving to your component as an observable?
I'm not saying it's not necessarily arriving as an observable, but let's say you're making a call and then you have to set a bunch of data and then do a bunch of stuff in a view. I'm coming at this from trying to work with existing code that kind of sucks anyway.
Yeah, that could be.
So
Yeah.
it's like, well, I could do this really
Right.
complicated thing to make every piece of data async pipeable.
Yeah.
But this thing's coming in and there's calculating, and there's 20 lines of code doing this thing in a subscribe.
Right.
But I want to change it to OnPush and do
Oh,
some other
I
stuff.
see.
So
Because you wrote code in a subscribe. I gotcha.
Yeah.
right.
Because you have legacy code that has a bunch of crap and a bunch of subscribes.
Or
and
if
you
there's
can't fix the whole world right now.
yeah.
But you want to do OnPush to reduce the number of needless change detections that are happening.
Yeah, I found some situations where I was trying to go towards an async pipe, and then what I ended up with was it was getting so ridiculously complicated. I'm like, you know what? If I just back up, throw in a mark for check, and do it, and leave the subscribe, is actually way simpler, and I don't have to.
That's like super hard to teach in class, isn't it? Like making the trade-off of like, okay, so if you're writing new code, you would do it this way, but if there's legacy code, like here's like a thing that gets you partway there that really gets you really almost all the benefits.
I think that's like day 15.
Day 15 of the 3-day
I
class.
guess I like to understand why crap works, and the whole point of the async is that it subscribes and unsubscribes, and it calls mark for check.
Yeah.
The calling mark for check part is as important as the unsubscribe part, and we never mention it.
Okay, so
And that's the only reason it's relevant to a change detection.
let's pop back one on the stack. So I like the idea of not having like two things that are confusing to each other, but I'm telling you, this step has to keep the relevance of the async pipe, because again, at the point in class where we're getting to this kind of content, we have just spent like half a day or more helping students understand and use observables and async pipe. And so if we get to this and we say, hey, yeah, don't worry about that async pipe thing anymore. Like all the hands immediately go up. But what if I was using an async pipe there? So we need to put it in the right place in the right context. But absolutely, we need to demonstrate the merit.
Or two levels of component.
Okay. So we need possibly a step split and possibly more components.
Yeah, because here you have two things. You're like, okay, I mean, if you're trying to do it in the same step, I'm not disagreeing. It could be two steps. Like if you're trying to do it in the same step, async pipe's only relevant if you have a parent and a child component, and the parent component who's making the backend call, if you change his change detection to OnPush.
Yeah.
Because then it doesn't matter how much you mutate the inputs of the guy below him. If Angular doesn't know he did anything, it doesn't matter.
And so I think a problem with what we have here is that, well, actually, let's check. We didn't understand our layers, right?
So this is just app component. So
I wrote this section of code in front of us. So if it's wrong, it's my fault.
Okay.
At the time, I was under the impression that you had to statically, like at compile time, set OnPushness. And so if you look at the default strategy and OnPush strategy components, as I understand, those are different because they have to be different. Because you can't, like at runtime, those change detection is not a runtime changeable setting. And so I ended up making two different components were as analogous as they could be, named in a way that makes it obvious which is which. And maybe they should be named like in a problem domain way with OnPush at the end rather than the naming we have here might be suboptimal, but they were analogous, and I think they both use that item detail component. And that gets you that multiple level thing, right? Because like I actually don't know if item detail is on push or not.
I don't think it is.
And I
It's
don't
not
know
my
if we
fault.
ever changed that while teaching.
I don't think
Yeah,
the inputs
it's-
ever change though.
But the one that makes
Oh,
the AJAX
yeah.
call or the backend call is the one that needs to be switched from on. I think Jack's right. I think it needs a separate step. Like
Well-
I feel like we should remove. I feel like the async pipe is irrelevant to this example because it has nothing to do with the inputs.
So how do we capture the merit
And
of
then
the async pipe?
I think what you need is a component to take away the different pieces. A component that makes a backend call and shows the results on its own view.
And it uses OnPush.
And you switch it from on. Yeah, have two copies of it. One that uses OnPush, one that uses default, and show that how, well, cause how did you do this? You need like a whole bunch of them, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you
Yeah,
would need
you
like
need
some
the
broken
combination.
ones and some working ones, right? Because if you switch it to OnPush, if you switch it to OnPush, the component that is OnPush and uses subscribe is gonna break.
But
So you need
I'm
one.
cautious about that. We try really hard to show code the way we recommend doing it. So I'm cautious about adding another step this deep in that like suggests that one might be wise to use subscribe. Because again,
Well,
like
then I would
subscribes
say-
like for me, subscribes have a really hard time in code review. Like a
Okay.
subscribe on new
So-
code is like, well, what is the argument in this code for why this has to manually subscribe?
So
Then we shouldn't even show async pipe at all in this step.
yeah, I think that we actually we need to split this into two steps
Yeah.
because there's two concepts we're trying to communicate. One is what is on push as opposed to default.
Yeah.
And why would you use it?
Yeah.
And what implications does that have? And then the other one is the whole thing about the async pipe triggering change detection.
And
so
the
they're
important
both
thing is
about change detection.
Just make sure I get you right. The interesting thing is that it triggers a change detection on itself.
Yeah.
And so it's stupid to demonstrate it where it's like passing into a child component.
Yeah, right,
Because that,
right.
Because that
It's
makes the whole
irrelevant.
thing irrelevant.
Yes.
Okay, so what if we split this and then we have to rename both, right? So we have to have a 708.1 or whatever. We have to come up with two good names and like, wow, good names are a hard problem. But the second one can actually be simpler. It can just, like you're saying, it can just be two versions of the same component. And one of them will be like on pushing but async piping inside the same component.
Mm-hmm. But you don't want to. But if you don't want to show a not good practice, then how do you demonstrate why it matters? Like, how do you demonstrate that
Because
it's doing something?
in the other, we'll do the other variant where for whatever we'll find some justifiable reason why we set a new value inside the component and we illustrate that the change is not picked up if you put it on push mode. It's like, oh, if you just like set the value in the component, what are you doing?
It's not letting me change the file or the folder name.
Yeah, you need to close all your files, Jack. You can't do this
But
when you
he's
have.
doing it on a copy. He doesn't have anything open in that directory of what he was trying to change.
Yeah, just remember. You remember this, right? Quit this and
think
come
so.
back in, and it'll have happened.
Wait, what?
We discovered that
Can I just reload the window instead of
we
quitting
can't
all
have
the way?
nice things.
Yeah.
Certain changes you try to make, they end up like kind of being like they end up stuck. It just
Yeah.
like they just don't happen until you it, like this thing keeps the files locked. So you use this thing to try to rename a folder,
Oh.
but it's keeping a lock on the folder while
Yeah.
you're using it, and so. I've seen Jack like make 4 or 5 changes in a row and then have to quit, and then they all take effect.
Oh, that's
it's-
interesting.
Yeah.
So I think this one should be second.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
gonna be
definitely.
0.5.
Yeah. Okay, so now this one here, we could actually stop using OnPush in, right? Because like you said, the way we're using OnPush here is kind of irrelevant.
Well, no, it's
No,
the other way
around.
Other way around. This is the one where we're demonstrating.
Okay, I'm sorry, async pipe. I'm
Async
sorry,
pipe,
yeah,
yes.
async
Yes,
pipe.
yes.
So I think
yeah,
we
it
need
is
to come.
relevant.
So part of the reason why we're doing this is we want to come up with a motivated example, right?
Yeah, I
of
feel
using
like we
OnPush.
have yet to demonstrate anything of why we want on push.
Yes. So
Yeah, but first let's get it, or let's narrow this example down to the two things that actually matter.
Yeah,
which
let's
is
narrow this
mutable
down,
versus immutable.
and then we'll commit
with
that as a
OnPush.
step forward, and then we'll maybe go to another segment and try to figure out
okay.
how we actually demonstrate it. So let's just like do this we have some introductory conversation, and we're going to try to like just start to get some of the machinery in place.
Before we go
So-
in, should we end this video? And then,
Well, we might as well just go ahead and like do just some file editing here, and then before we start trying to figure out a motivated example, we'll start a fresh
So
segment.
we want to eliminate the
That one,
observable,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
then we're going to eliminate that from our ng switch
and then there should be
case.
3 variations that use it, or 2 variations that use it.
It's
See,
complicated, isn't it?
well, this will make it less complicated, right?
Yes.
It will, which
So
is
now
good.
there's only 4 combinations instead of 6.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's better. I think it's really
let's
getting
go
down to what
ahead
actually
and-
matters.
Can we delete?
So where's that?
We just have this data service, which we can
I see.
delete the.
Yeah, what's in there?
So we can delete this
Yeah, how
item
do-
list 3 and anything that uses it.
Is it-
whoa, hold on,
wait,
hold on.
you got to tell us what this does again.
Yeah,
So this is the service that actually manages the data.
Okay.
So it is the thing that is actually managing
Okay.
the array, or the mutable array,
Oh.
the immutable array, and the observable for
I
and the
understand,
immutable
okay.
array.
Can you-
Okay.
Right. So this is the mutable array. This is the immutable array, and this one is the observable for immutable arrays.
And we can just take that away now.
Right.
And
Can
that's
we-
static anyway, so it really didn't matter.
Yeah.
Wait, say that again?
So then there should be.
There was no
some
back end call
errors
anyway, so
here.
like it really didn't matter because there was nothing asynchronous.
Well,
happening.
simulated. No, it's
It's
simulated.
simulated,
That's why we did the interval thing, because we wanted real asynchronicity without having to like add back-end calls,
Yeah. Okay.
which is reasonable. That's not bad.
Okay.
Okay, so we
Interval
populate
by
the initial
delay.
one.
See, simulate incoming data flow,
Okay.
and it just calls like that generic add item, which then basically. So this is a really weird service, right? Because it's like literally doing each thing 2 different ways to show you the 2 different ways to do it.
Better than doing it 3 different ways.
That's true.
And you're leaving app component as default, which is the only reason why this all works.
Yes.
This would not work if it was in.
But we have
non-push
to because
component.
like, well, I mean, like the knob,
Hmm?
like the knob you can turn, can't change the setting of the top level component.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we'd have to
It
move
would be
stuff
too
a layer
hard.
deeper.
Yeah. No, I understand. I was just
Yeah.
trying to think through like why it worked at all.
Oh, that's an interesting point. I didn't even think about that.
Say again.
That if you had change detection on push on the top one,
It wouldn't.
nothing
work.
can push into it, so it
Well,
never
but-
detects changes.
So we have we have 3 layers right now, right?
right.
We don't need to permute the setting of the topmost one. Because you only need 2 layers. Anything you want to demonstrate with this, you can demonstrate with 2
Mhm.
layers, right?
Mhm.
So that's why the topmost one we're never going to try to permute, because there
Right.
is no way at runtime to permute this.
Right.
So we're going to use our bottom 2 layers to demonstrate whatever we demonstrate.
Which is why so this one in no way demonstrates how it deals with asynchronicity. We're going to do that in the second step.
Okay.
Okay, so is there anything else in here about observability?
Uh,
Look at that, line 8 says 3 different ways. It should say 2 different ways now.
and then there is a subscribe down below. Do we need that still?
Yeah.
What is
Yeah. This is what
I think so.
changes the array.
Yes.
My point is
This
like
is the thing that kicks off the interval.
yeah.
Okay.
And so if this was in the
And I
on
think
push
we said we don't
component,
want
it
to take
wouldn't work.
100. You just want to keep it going forever.
Was there a reason why? I think there was, because if
If you just leave for lunch or something,
yeah,
it just
we
keeps going.
don't want
Lots
to
of
crash a
bigger
browser if you leave for lunch. So you could make the number bigger.
Let's make it
Right.
like 10,000.
Well, why don't you
Or
make it
1,000.
1,000? Yeah, this is probably still going to be okay, and you can teach for a really long time without hitting it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Okay.
2,000 seconds. So yeah,
Okay,
really
so
over half an hour.
yeah, so it'll be fine. Okay, so
here's a subscribe. You were just saying that you would give a subscribe a hard time before you would let it survive in a code review.
look at line 74. Right? Yeah.
So all right, just
Oh,
the word simulate? Is
yeah.
that- Okay.
Yeah. Like this is doing an
Obviously
intentional
fake.
thing.
Okay.
It's also protected by line 79.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, I mean, on the one hand, if you tore this down, it could needlessly run for a while, but it's not a truly hanging subscription.
No.
So you didn't have to like take responsibility and tear it down. You say, well, worst case, it'll throw data that gets thrown away for a little while. Okay, so how are we looking on this step now? Why don't we get this one back up and running?
It should still be running. It should just have one less.
Nope.
You renamed it. You need to, well, do we need to rename this?
yeah, because we're not on the same thing anymore.
Yeah, you can click on lesson list when you get back to the. Whoa.
I think it
Yes.
when I reloaded the window,
Oh,
it killed
yeah, it
my.
does that. Yeah.
Do you have to CD and ABC?
Yes, he does. That's why I always run them in a separate command window because I don't like.
Yeah, I do too. I don't
Yeah.
Yeah.
like this setup.
Basically, I like my IDE. I like my development environment to be less integrated. So I want a DE with less I in it.
Here we go.
Okay,
So it
so
should be just two. Right,
So-
the mutated array and the replaced array.
Right.
okay, so let's get. Meaning, right now we have two steps that have the same name up at the top of the screen. Also, so we need to figure out two good names. Then we need to like make the name at the top of the screen be different on the two of them.
Okay.
So
these are the ones that I just came up with just to distinguish these folders.
So I think the async pipe one, that's what like we're gonna do all our stuff about there, that one there,
Mhm.
right? Okay, so
But naming.
calling it change detection on push. I mean,
They're both about on push
yeah,
change detection.
yeah. So the on push is not a good word.
One's about inputs and one's about like asynchronous handling asynchronous events.
Oh wait, how about change detection mutation? Because it's about whether we're mutating the array or not.
Change detection and mutability.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, so I think that's backwards though, right? Because we talk about the importance of immutability in this step because we're turning on the on push change detection. Up to
Right.
this point, we've been just using the default change
I
detection
mean, what we call it
strategy.
change detection and mutability or and immutability, like because we're going to talk about the relationship of change detection and mutability.
Potentially.
I mean, yeah, because we're trying to differentiate between 08 and 08.5. They're both about
Yeah.
on-push change detection.
Yeah.
But one's about immutable versus mutable inputs. The second one's about
Yeah.
handling data outside of DOM or things
How
outside of DOM
about change detection inputs?
Yeah, I
because
think
like as you
that's
pointed
yeah.
out, this is really about the inputs.
Yeah.
It's not about what happens inside the component anyway.
Right.
The name is getting a little long, and you remember you got to quit before it'll. You have to quit to reload your window for your folder rename to take effect.
I love that it doesn't have any errors. It's just like, sure.
It just like sits and it waits.
And now you have to restart.
I guess that was it. Maybe we have longer names, so that name is acceptably short. And then in there, you need to go edit the index HTML of each, and then it'll be reasonably good. Yeah, this is great. Much better.
No, we can forget about it. So
Okay.
what did you want me to
So
put
if
here?
you, I think that's fine because
Okay.
we have other longer names and it's not a problem.
Okay.
But inside that 708, in the index HTML, the name at the top on line 4 needs to somehow reflect like change detection dash component inputs or something. You see what I'm saying? We want the names to be like we want reasonably matching names. And then you also have to change line 19 to match. Ideally, and maybe somebody else can code this, we'd have a piece of tooling that would like go through and either like reconcile name differences. We have a lot of our custom tooling though, and it's not fun.
So do we want to take the async pipe name here, or?
Sure.
Okay.
And the same thing down on 19. And of course, this one's very much in progress. And this, just for the sake of not messing up our outlines, you need to go to the explanation file in each. And probably the first one will probably keep the full explanation it has now.
Yeah.
The second one, you can probably get rid of most of this and then put just some little bit at the top. Like maybe change that H2, change detection with the async pipe. How about that? That way this will have a separate entry. Okay.
Should I capitalize this?
It's probably
or-
angry because you need a blank line maybe after it. There's some
Sure.
reason it's angry, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if I should capitalize async pipe.
I don't think they do.
Okay.
I think it's fine. Okay, so is this good enough we could commit and push this? Or
think
at least
so.
commit it? Okay, go for it.
Can definitely commit it. Do we want to change this?
No. I mean, because we are going to be talking about why it matters, right?
Okay.
Okay, so let's do what it takes to get this committed.
So this is moving the files and then adding a whole bunch of others.
So this is like start splitting, change detection, teaching. Yeah, try to put like the word change detection in here because somebody just skimming down the list of commits, right? You don't want the person to have to like go read all the file names to figure out what you're working on. Yeah. Okay.
Do we care about the 53 characters for the first line? or whatever the number is.
We're going to do a series of commits, and then Paul is going to end up squashing them together and retitling them anyway. So we do care at the end state,
But not
we
yet.
try not to spend energy on the interim work in progress commits.
Here, just to make you happy.
Make it how Lance says. There you go. Fantastic. Okay, so get that committed. And then I guess we may say bye to everybody, and we'll start a new segment. We're going to work on the actual... So the real hard conversation will be back on the next episode. Okay.
Okay.